I'm Michelle Shingler, the editor-in-chief of Foreword Reviews, and you're tuning into Petit Foreword, our bite-sized interviews with indie authors. Today we're speaking with Sarah Yham, whose debut novel, Unfinished Acts of Wild Creation, released on May 6th. It's an exquisite novel about chronic illness and defiant love. Sarah, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So the three generations of women in your novel react to their medical challenges in very different ways. The eldest unchangingly, the middle by wanting to protect her family, and the youngest by drawing her family closer. Do you see any of them as being more correct in their approaches?
That's an interesting question, and I'm gonna share a personal anecdote that I think will just reveal the impossibility of finding a right answer. Last year, I don't know, like a year and a half ago, when my mother was dying and she was in hospice, and my mother kept falling into a coma and then waking up and then falling into a coma and waking up. This happened 5 or 6 times. It was hellish. We would go, we would say goodbye, and then she would reemerge, and then it was like brutal, right? And then she was in hospice and she had this death rattle for days. And I was driving home with my sister from Burlington. I live in Vermont. And I turned to my sister and I said, Louise was right to leave and spare her daughter this torture. Louise is one of the main characters, the one who leaves when she gets sick. And my sister was like, she absolutely was not right to leave. And we fought about it the whole way home, which was a wonderful break from actually talking about what was happening with my mother. But like, that's what I want this book to do, is like start a conversation between sisters, an argument between sisters when they're like leaving their mother's deathbed about like what is the right thing to do, because there's no answer, right? It was torture, but also I desperately wanted to be there for my mother. And when I thought that I like left and then she started dying more actively, and when I thought I was going to miss it, I let loose this like scream like nothing I've ever let loose. Like I desperately wanted to be with her as much as it was torture. So I have nothing except a conversation.
Yeah, that's a great conversation starter too. So Louise also judges herself pretty harshly. She judges herself as a mother pretty harshly too. I was struck by how tender she was, though. She shows Lydia so much care, in particular when it comes to helping her recover from her sexual assault, and with the indulgence of magical thinking. Do you think anything could persuade Louise to see herself as a great mother?
I mean, until Louise leaves, which is a pretty dramatic maternal decision. Until that point, I think, like all mothers, like most mothers like me, sometimes she thinks she's killing it, and sometimes she thinks she's really screwing up. There are moments when she knows she's doing a great job. There's a moment when Lydia's a teenager and she's starting to have sex for the first time, and Louise pulls out our bodies ourselves and is like really great and present and unflappable and funny. And she knows she's fantastic in that moment. I think the problem with Louise as a mother is that she's a little bit of a narcissist. So sometimes instead of entering into her daughter's world, she tries to pull Lydia into hers, right? Like the force of love is always there, but she's not always a great listener. And then there's this question of whether it's ever acceptable to leave your kid, even if you're attempting to spare them, right? And so that's sort of a larger existential question. But I do think Louise sometimes thinks she's a great mother. It's just there's this question. I actually originally wanted to call the book Maternal Math until my agent was like, absolutely not. Nobody buys books that are about math, and the word maternal is alienating. But there is that whole section where she talks about that calculation and she makes it algebraic, right? Like my needs versus my daughter's needs, the like desperate need to sniff your kid's head and be with them, and also the desperate need to be yourself and push away. And so the book is really about that push pull and the impossible mathematics of it.
Yeah, that's such a great equation too. I love that. So I
I thought
also
it was a
like
great title, but
yeah, I think it's good. It captures it. Lydia is also able to imagine herself running parallel to her other selves in the multiverse and sort of think about what's going on in the other Lydia's lives. If she had to pull anything into her own life from those other possibilities, what do you think she'd choose to borrow?
oh, Lydia, um she does sometimes want to be braver than she is, right? Like she has OCD, she's neurotic, she's frightened, and she sometimes does want to be this like carpe diem Lydia, this like brave, fearless person, right? Though she comes to peace with the fact that she's not and figures out a way to have adventure that is acceptable to her, right? The real tragedy for Lydia, the parallel life she wants to lead, is having a baby. She doesn't get to have a baby, and her real gift is like entering into the magical world of children, and play has always been her relief from her OCD and her obsessive thinking. And she does that with other children in this, when she works at this adventure playground in the UK, she does that, but she doesn't get to have her own. And I think that is the genuine tragedy for Lydia.
Louise and Leon also have a really enviable relationship. They spar and support each other and help each other's dreams along. What do you think is the foundation of their relationship?
I actually was thinking about that, and I have a quote from the book. Uh, so when they first get together, I mean, they like get together, and then they don't get together, and then when they eventually do get together, Louise hates euphemisms. She hates it, right? She hates pretense. She needs honesty. And so there's this line where Leon says something reassuring, and she says, don't say things you don't mean. And then, she gets angry at him. And then he says, I swear, no bullshit or euphemisms to the best of my ability. Louise stared at him and nodded. Okay, she said with finality, as if she decided something, as if some sort of sacrament had occurred, right? So that's the sacrament of their relationship, is no euphemisms or bullshit, right? And a particular type of like dark sense of humor, right? But I think what happens, and the reason why Louise has to leave, is that social contract gets broken because Leon is so upset and terrified about the fact that she's sick and dying that he forces them to live in this place of denial, and she can't live there. Like, she can't do that, and it's so lonely and alienating to not be honest with him, that I think that honestly is kind of, there are many factors, but that's one of the main factors that makes her leave. And then they re-find each other, and they re-find each other through that endless honest hilarious conversation.
So, Jewish culture also has a very strong presence in your book and centers the vocabularies of your main characters. How do Lydia, Leon, and Louise's Jewish identities inform their approaches to family and illness?
Yeah. So, I mean, I come from a very particular subset of Judaism, right? And if you talk about like cultural Judaism, two Jews, three opinions, there are like a million different subsets of that. So, definitely this is sort of my house growing up, right? It's like counterculture, hyper educated, lefty, New York Jews, most of whom are therapists. That's like a very, very specific subset. um, and to me, that just means this like nonstop, endless conversation, right? There are like no boundaries between the internal and the external. Um, I always think about Grace Paley as like my primary model as a writer, and she frequently doesn't use quotation marks in her stories because her characters' thoughts and what they say are so blurred, right? And so that's sort of the form of Judaism that I see. I mean, also this like very dark sense of humor, right? Among these characters, this like, but really this like honest, hilarious authenticity, this like, oh my God, I'm having this crazy neurotic thought. I'm going to articulate it out loud, right? Like this idea, and this is in some ways what I'm like deeply committed to as a writer. And all the work I've done is this idea of like, articulating interiority out loud, and this idea that like people think, it doesn't even occur to people that they can like speak out loud these like random thoughts that they've had. And like that was the gift of my childhood, and the gift of the Rosenberg household is that there's like no barrier about what can be said and what can be thought and what can be articulated. And to me, that is what Judaism means.
So, Sarah, what are you working on next?
Oh, I am about three-quarters of the way through a novel. The working title is Kindernook. It's gonna have to change. My agent's gonna nix it. But it's the name of like a weird ritual. Anyway, it's neither here nor there. That's Nishkafelig, as they would say in Yiddish. It's neither here nor there. And it's about a commune in upstate New York, and sexual abuse that happens on this commune, and the ongoing ramifications of that sexual abuse over the following subsequent decades. Um, like Unfinished Acts, it is about a family, a daughter, a mother, and a father, and the different way that these events impact all three of them, spiraling outwards. But unlike Unfinished Acts, where there's that like warmth and connection that like permeates the book, and they get alienated and they reconnect, but like that warmth continues. Um, these folks are more alienated, and it's about like learning how to be connected and how to build that type of relationship.
So to our audience, Unfinished Acts of Oil Creation is on shelves now. You should go pick it up. It's wonderful. I gave it to my mother for Mother's Day. Thank you, Sarah, so much for taking the time to speak with us. It's been
Mhm.
wonderful, and thank you.
Bye.